Welcome back to So What Does That Mean? The podcast where we cut through the jargon and talk about engineering, planning, and construction in plain English. I'm Brendan, the engineer.
And I'm Joanne, the non-engineer. Whether you're a developer, a builder, a homeowner, an investor, or just someone trying to figure out what the heck is going on in the construction world, you're in the right place.
Every episode, we pick something that's costing people real time, real money, and real stress, and we unpack it so it actually makes sense.
No jargon walls, no lectures, just real conversations from people who deal with this stuff every single day. Right, Brendan, today we're talking about development applications, and I know how that sounds.
It sounds about as exciting as reading the phone book. DA, council forms, planning reports, not exactly riveting.
But here's the thing, a development application is where most projects either get their foundations right or start falling apart. So it matters a lot more than the name suggests.
Exactly. And today I want to walk through a real type of project. We're not naming anyone, that's not the point. But this is based on the kind of work that we do all the time at JCE. A residential site in Logan Home, in Logan, LGA, where someone's looking at a small development outcome. And the big question is, can we get this through council?
And the less obvious question is, who should be running the whole process?
That's really what this episode is about, because most people think a DA is a town planning job, and a big part of it is. But when you've got flood overlays, stormwater questions, survey requirements, a possible subdivision, servicing issues, site levels, and access to think about, it's a lot more than planning.
It's a coordination job.
It's planning, engineering, survey coordination, communication, and risk management all rolled into one. And if those pieces aren't connected from the start, the client ends up playing project manager without even signing up for it.
Which means chasing a planner, chasing a surveyor, chasing an engineer, trying to decode council's letters, and still not being sure who's responsible for what.
And that's where JC's model is different. We bring the planning and engineering thinking together from day one. When we need external specialists like surveyors, we manage that. The client isn't left holding 5 separate conversations and trying to translate between them.
Let's set the scene. What kind of sites are we talking about with this Logan Home example?
Think of a standard residential block in Logan, not a big commercial project, not a high-rise, the kind of site a lot of mums and dads, investors, or first-time developers look at and think there might be something here.
So a realistic everyday development opportunity?
Exactly. And that's important because this is the type of project where people often try to save money by engaging one professional at a time. Talk to a town planner first, then maybe a surveyor, then maybe an engineer. Then, if council asks, bring in the flood specialist. Each step seems reasonable on its own.
But each person is only really looking at their corner of the picture, aren't they?
Right. In the Logan Home example, the zoning supported residential development, a 3-lot subdivision or small residential outcome looked worth exploring on paper. But the site also had overlays, which for anyone who's not familiar with that term, it just means council has flagged some extra things they need to look at.
Things like flood risk, waterway and vegetation, that kind of stuff.
All of the above. Flood mapping, a minor waterway, vegetation considerations, potential acid sulfate soils, slope. And here's what I want people to hear. That doesn't mean your project is dead. Constraints don't automatically mean no.
They mean you need to do the work properly.
Exactly. A lot of people see an overlay and think council will never approve this. That's not always true. Often the answer is yes, it can work, but the design needs to respond to those constraints. Maybe floor levels need adjusting, maybe the building footprint needs to shift, maybe access needs careful thought, maybe stormwater needs a clear strategy.
And that's when the DA package becomes critical.
Hugely critical. If you lodge a DA with a nice looking site plan, but no technical thinking behind it, council is going to pull it apart. Not because they're being difficult, they're just doing their job. They need to know the risks have actually been thought through.
So let's talk about how this typically plays out when someone doesn't come to JCE. What's the usual pattern?
Most often, they start with a town planning firm. And I want to be really clear here. There are excellent town planners out there, and we work with good ones regularly. This isn't a dig at planners. A planner's job is to assess the planning scheme, prepare the planning report, handle the assessment pathway, and guide the application.
Which is genuinely important work.
Very important. But if the thing blocking the project is flood, stormwater, access, sewer, driveway grades, earthworks, or how much of the site can actually be built on, the planner can't fix that alone. They need technical input. So the planner says they need an engineer. The engineer says they need a survey. The surveyor needs clear instructions. Council asks a technical question, and suddenly everyone's waiting on everyone else.
And the client is stuck in the middle trying to make sense of it all.
Yep. And the hidden cost there isn't just the extra consultant fees. It's the delay, the confusion, the doubled up work, and the risk of lodging something that looks complete on the surface, but isn't actually holding together.
What about starting with a surveyor?
Surveyors are absolutely essential. A good survey is the foundation of the whole design. But a surveyor doesn't decide the planning strategy, prepare the town planning assessment, design the flood response, or solve the stormwater approach. So if someone starts with survey only, they've got information, but not necessarily direction.
And engineering only firms?
Can be excellent technically, but if they don't have the planning in-house, the engineering work might not actually line up with what council needs for the DA. You can have technically sound work that doesn't answer the planning codes properly, or work that's solid engineering but doesn't match the planning strategy.
What about development consultants or project managers?
Some are really good coordinators, especially on bigger projects. But on small to medium residential developments, if they need to engage a planner, a surveyor, an engineer, or a flood consultant separately, the client might end up paying someone to coordinate a group of people who are still working in silos anyway.
So it's not about those professionals being bad. It's about making sure the pieces are all actually joined together.
That's it. The best result usually comes when planning, engineering, survey, and authority communication are all working from the same strategy.
Let's talk about what integrated actually means in practice, because it's one of those words people throw around a lot.
Yeah, fair point. Integrated means that the town planning and engineering aren't two separate conversations that happen to meet at the end. They inform each other from the start. Take the Logan home example. Planner might look at the zoning and say, yes, 3 lots is potentially supported. But the engineer is looking at the flood overlay at the same time and asking, where can buildings actually go? What floor levels are likely needed? What fill might be involved? What stormwater approach will council accept? Where does access make sense relative to the waterway?
So the site plan gets designed with all of that already in it.
Exactly. The site plan isn't just a picture. It becomes a practical argument. It tells council, here's what we're asking you to approve, and here's how we've already thought through the site constraints. That makes the DA much stronger.
So what would actually go into a DA package for a site like this?
At a high level, the town planning report and code responses, a proposed site plan, survey coordination, a flood assessment, and the minimum engineering input needed to properly support the lodgement. And I want to stress that last phase, minimum engineering needed for DA.
Why minimum?
Because at DA stage, the goal isn't to design every pipe and every retaining wall down to construction level. That's often premature. But you do need enough engineering thinking to show the concept actually works. You don't want to over-design before council has even said yes in principle. But you absolutely don't want to lodge a plan with no understanding of flood, stormwater, access, sewer, or site levels.
So not over-designing, but not underthinking it either.
That's exactly the sweet spot. Enough to guide council, enough to support the application, enough to reduce the chance of avoidable information requests, but not so much detail that the client's spending money on full civil design before they even have approval.
Flood sounds like the big one in this example. Can you walk us through it?
Flood was a major constraint. The site had both high and moderate flood risk mapping. In a DA context, flood isn't just about whether water reaches the site. It's about risk levels, floor heights, filling, stormwater behaviour, neighbouring properties, and whether the development makes things worse for anyone.
And a planning report can't just wave that away.
No, a planning report can identify the overlay and say a flood assessment is needed, but the actual technical work has to consider what the flood constraint means for the layout. If a proposed lot has a dwelling area in the wrong spot, council may question whether it's buildable. If fill is shown on a plan, but there's no assessment of the impact, council will ask for more. If the site is near a waterway, council needs to see that the setbacks and flood conveyance have been thought about.
And if those questions come after you've already lodged,
The clock stops, essentially. An information request isn't just a letter. It can mean a month, 2 months, 3 months, or more, depending on what's been asked, who needs to respond, whether extra modelling is needed, and whether the consultant team is actually coordinated.
and if you've got 4 separate consultants all charging hourly to respond,
It adds up fast. The planning firm charges to interpret the request. The engineer charges to address the technical items. The surveyor might need to revise their work. A specialist might need to get involved. A project manager might charge to wrangle all of it. And the client is often genuinely shocked because they thought they paid for the DA.
and this is where JCE's approach to information requests matters.
Exactly. Where an information request relates to items within the scope of what we've been engaged to do, we handle that response without charging extra. That's not a blank check. If council asks for something genuinely outside the agreed scope, like full detailed flood modelling, ecological reporting, geotechnical work, or a completely different design approach, that can still be a variation. But if council asks a reasonable question about the planning, flood, or engineering items we included, we're not turning every email into an invoice.
That's a meaningful difference.
It's a big deal because clients hate the feeling that the original quote was just the entry fee. They want to know the team will back the work they've put their name to.
Let's spend a moment on the coordination headache because I think people underestimate how much mental load there is in one of these projects.
Completely underestimated. If you're a client with a town planner, a surveyor, a civil engineer, a flood engineer, and a project manager, all working separately, you've got to manage timing, information flow, invoices, deliverables, revisions, assumptions, and handovers between all of them.
And everyone speaks a slightly different language.
Exactly. The planner talks about codes, overlays, and assessment benchmarks. The surveyor talks about levels, boundaries, easements, and datums. The engineer talks about drainage, flood levels, access grades, and infrastructure. Council talks about properly made applications, assessment criteria, and referral agencies. And the client is thinking,
I just want to know if I can build on my block.
that's why reducing the translation burden matters. We keep the strategy in one place. If we need a surveyor, we manage the surveyor. If the planner needs engineering input, it's internal. If the engineer spots a planning issue, they raise it with the planning team straight away. If council asks a question, the response is coordinated.
And that sounds obvious, but that's not always how the market works.
No, the market often rewards narrow scopes. A consultant quotes cheaply for their own little piece. It looks attractive, but the client doesn't see the coordination gap until later. And when things go wrong, everyone can honestly say, that wasn't in my scope.
Which is probably one of the most frustrating things you can hear when a project is in trouble.
It is. And sometimes it's true. Consultants can't be responsible for work they weren't engaged to do, but the client's problem still exists. Someone still needs to solve it.
You mentioned before we started reporting that the DA coordination isn't just technical, it's psychological.
It really is. My postgraduate study in business psychology has genuinely shaped how I think about project delivery. A development application involves real people under pressure, not just documents. You've got a client who's financially exposed, council officers with statutory requirements, referral agencies with their own risk thresholds, consultants managing their liability. All of those people are communicating under pressure.
So, how does that affect the way JCE runs a project?
It affects tone, framing, clarity, and sequencing. If you send council a defensive, cluttered, overloaded response, you make their job harder. If you lodge a DA that ignores obvious constraints, you lose their trust early. If you communicate like you're arguing instead of problem solving, you create friction that doesn't need to be there.
So, the goal isn't to bulldoze the application through.
Not at all. The goal is to make the approval pathway easy to understand. You want council to see that the applicant has identified the constraints, responded to them practically, and given them the information they need to make a decision. That's not weakness, that's smart strategy.
And you hold the same standard for your team?
Yes, employees and subcontractors working under JC's coordination. The standard is the same. Be clear, be practical, solve the problem, communicate respectfully, and don't dump confusion onto the client.
That's actually a really important point. People often judge a consultant by the report, but it's the communication that determines how stressful the whole experience feels.
100%. Technical competence matters, but poor communication can turn a manageable problem into a conflict. And good communication can turn a complex problem into a clear action plan.
So when a client engages JCE for a DA package like this, what are they actually buying?
They're buying a coordinated pathway, not just a report. In practical terms, town planning input, site plan preparation, survey coordination, flood assessment, DA stage engineering, and support throughout the lodgement. But the real value is that those pieces are aligned and talking to each other.
So the client doesn't have to manage the headaches.
That's the simplest way to say it. The client is still making the decisions. It's their project, but they shouldn't have to be the technical translator between 6 different professionals.
And speed is part of it too?
Yes and no. We can't control council's timeframes. We can't guarantee there won't be an information request, but we can reduce avoidable delay by lodging a more complete, better coordinated application.
So not magic speed, just fewer delays that you brought on yourself.
Exactly. A lot of project delay is self-inflicted. Missing survey data, no flood input, a site plan that doesn't match the planning report, engineering assumptions that don't line up with the planning strategy, a planner waiting on an engineer who never got the right brief, all avoidable.
And an avoidable delay is the most painful kind because the client paid for it without needing to.
Exactly right.
One thing I like about this example is that it's not doom and gloom. The site had real constraints, but also had genuine development opportunity.
That's the balance message. A site with flood mapping or overlays isn't automatically a bad site. A waterway constraint doesn't automatically mean the project can't happen. It just needs a smarter approach.
Which is actually a much more useful message than just saying it's too hard.
Definitely. JCE's team genuinely enjoys working through that kind of a problem. We're not looking for reasons a project can't work. We're looking for the practical pathways that gives it the best chance of succeeding while being honest about the risks.
Because some consultants can be so cautious that everything feels impossible.
Yes. And others are so optimistic they gloss over the real constraints. Neither is helpful. What clients need is realistic optimism. Here's the opportunity. Here's the risk. Here's the pathway forward.
Realistic optimism, that's a great phrase.
It suits development. You need optimism to start, but realism to get through.
Let's make this practical. If someone's listening and they're about to lodge a DA, what questions should they be asking before they engage anyone?
First, who is coordinating the whole package, not just who's writing the planning report?
Second,
Does the site need engineering input before lodgement? If there are flood overlays, stormwater constraints, access issues, steep ground, servicing questions, or subdivision works, the answer is probably yes.
third,
Who is managing the surveyor? Because if the survey brief is wrong, everything downstream can be wrong. The feature and contour survey needs to support the DA strategy, not just exist.
Fourth,
What happens when council issues an information request? Is responding to that included in the scope of work already prepared? Or is every response charged hourly?
that's a big one.
Massive. And fifth, will the site plan, planning report, and engineering advice be checked against each other before anything goes to council?
Because if they contradict each other,
Council will find it. And even if council misses it, the contradiction will usually create problems when the project moves to detailed design.
so the checklist is coordination, engineering input, survey management, information request approach, and internal consistency between documents.
5 questions that can save a lot of pain.
Let's address something carefully because people might hear this and ask, are you saying don't use town planners, surveyors, or project managers?
Absolutely not. Good town planners are valuable. Good surveyors are essential. Good engineers are also essential. Good project managers can be extremely helpful. This isn't a knock on other professions. It's about making sure the project has the right structure.
So, when is JCE actually the better fit?
When the project needs integrated planning and engineering input. When the client doesn't want to be the one coordinating multiple consultants. When the site has technical constraints, or when the client wants one team accountable for a practical DA pathway.
And small development sites often tick all of those boxes.
Very often, especially infill in established suburbs, stormwater, sewer, flood, access, site levels, services, overlays, infrastructure charges, neighbouring properties. It all stacks up quickly.
And a cheap lodgement only package might not actually be cheaper if it creates more work later.
Price has to be compared to scope and risk. If one firm is preparing a planning report and another is coordinating planning, survey, flood, and DA stage engineering, those are not the same service. The client needs to compare total project coordination, not just the line item.
Well, let's wrap this up. What's the single message you want listeners to take from this Logan example?
A development application isn't just paperwork. It's the first real test of whether the development idea, the site constraints, and what council requires can actually be brought together into a pathway that works.
And if those pieces are separated too early, the client ends up carrying the coordination risk.
Exactly. The best DA package isn't necessarily the thickest one. It's the clearest one. It shows council that the project has been thought through, the constraints have been recognized, and the right technical inputs have been included at the right level.
And that's where JCE fits.
That's where we fit. Planning, engineering, and practical development thinking in one place. We manage external inputs. We don't leave clients coordinating headaches they didn't sign up for. And we stand behind our scope when council asks reasonable questions within it.
So if you're looking at a development site, especially one with overlays, flood mapping, subdivision potential, or servicing questions, don't just ask who can lodge my DA.
Ask who can help me lodge the right DA.
That's a strong finish.
And if this episode made you think differently about your next development application, share it with someone looking at a block of land right now. It might save them months of confusion.
Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, and connect with us on LinkedIn.
And as always, if you've got a topic, a question, or a development headache you want us to unpack, send it through to JCE. We genuinely enjoy this stuff.
Thanks for listening.
See you on the next one.